got to give credit where credit's due to Glenn Greenwald, who did an excellent job and is an anti-Zionist Jew, in case anybody forgot. So he sat down with a whole bunch of still MAGA supporters. And it's very interesting listening to people when they have to defend their position, not just on Israel, but on endless war.
I want to talk about that. I just want to ask you, and I'm not trying to be personal in any way, but I do think it's an interesting phenomenon that for centuries, when countries wanted to go to war and people said, yeah, let's go to war, the big test was, are you willing to risk your own life in the war that you think is so important to defend your country's interests? You seem like a young guy to me. Have you ever thought about going and fighting in this war that you're cheering on?
I mean, I've thought about joining the military before. I don't know about this war specifically, but.
Yeah, you see, because unfortunately, this war specifically would likely get him killed. And he doesn't want to get killed because he's a coward and probably a cuck too. And of course, as a result, he wants other people, much like every Israeli, to have somebody else go and die on his behalf because he is not willing to die for this country. That is a huge part of this problem. And that has always been a huge part of warfare. The loudest in the room that cheer on war are always the biggest cowards. Always. And they sure as hell have never served, and they sure as hell have never served in combat. Because if they did, they would understand that war is hell, and it should always be the last resort. If we were in a Red Dawn situation here in the United States, where a foreign adversary stormed our beaches, entered our land, started killing Americans left and right, would I stand up to defend my nation? Yes, I would. And I would believe most Americans would probably do the same. But as you know, we go around the world picking fights with everybody that is in our way of economic and political dominance. And that again gets back to the biggest reason why we tolerate anything and everything when it comes to the state of Israel. What's the biggest issue here? The economic and political ramifications of dealing with them is still deeply embedded within our governmental structure. And now they're attempting to make it even more insane with this merging of the two militaries. We've got more to go.
That's what makes them heroes. They put themselves in dangerous situations.
Yeah, I'm asking that because, as I said earlier, we are a country that constantly fights wars. It's extremely aberrational for other countries on the planet, including very powerful ones like China, as I said before, that has grown so significantly because they know that war is not a way that you pretend you protect your national interests, but you undermine them. But we are so eager, so it's so easy for us to say, oh yeah, go fight that war, go blow up these people.
We're a global superpower. Of course, we're dealing with stuff all the time.
China is a global superpower as well and doing infinitely better than the United States by so many metrics because of the, go ask Latin American and African countries with whom they're dealing more and who they prefer to deal with, China or the United States, and they will tell you that the United States is a bully country that runs the world through military force and China isn't.
You know, we pointed out that one of the key takeaways from the Vegas bioweapons lab story with the Israeli national who was granted immunity. They threw out the case. Now, of course, the judge who threw out the case is an Israeli national as well. But you know what they didn't do? They didn't do the same for the Chinese national that was involved. He got prosecuted. So what does that tell you? It tells you that there are, different rules for different people. But not everybody either recognizes this or understands it. This is why China is ahead of us. Now, perhaps their GDP is not exactly ours just yet. But if you are measuring 10, 20, 30 years, which is a generation, into the future, what trajectory do you think we're going on versus what they're going on? If China is here and we're here, that's where it's going. And anyone with a reasonable disposition can see the same thing. That's not to say that China doesn't do bad things, but China is much better at the political, economic, global game than our country is. And China does not drop bombs left and right all over this planet for the purpose of maintaining their empire. And so Glenn is right. And for most of these people, they don't seem to be too aware of that.
That's one of the problems that we have. But Iran has not attacked the United States, has no ability to attack the United States. A moral country only goes to war and blows up elementary schools if that country is actually attacking the United States. It's supposed to be a war of last resort. That is not the case here. We're blowing up their country. We're killing their people. We're threatening civilizational annihilation.
Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys saw the blonde, typical Trumpy-looking woman, shaking her head, getting upset. And so she took a turn at the table. Listen closely.
Hello.
Hello there. There's so many things I could talk for hours on end. Even giving Kamala Harris an appointation of, I don't know if that's a word, but appointing her as the
If you don't know if it's a word or not, you probably shouldn't use it.
next candidate because he wasn't able to run. You're America first, right? That's what you're saying, right? Okay, so do you agree that it was corrupt?
So I'm somebody who believes that there was a lot of corruption in the Biden administration. My claim is not that the Biden administration was free of meaningful corruption. It had a lot of corruption. My claim is that the Trump administration has a lot more corruption. And we can talk about what those financial deals are.
Please.
Okay, well, I'll just give you one example.
Okay.
Jared Kushner, who's now running Middle East foreign policy and negotiating Middle East policy for Donald Trump, his son-in-law.
And doing a great job.
Right before he
Could you imagine? Listen again.
who's now running Middle East foreign policy and negotiating Middle East policy for Donald Trump, his son-in-law.
And doing a great job.
Doing a great job. What exactly would you base Jared Kushner's foreign policy ability or efficiency? What are you basing that on? Because of something you heard from Fox News or from Benny Johnson or Gunther Eagleman or Cat Turd or Libs of TikTok? Who was it? She's probably drinking the bleach is the problem. This is a prime example of just not fully understanding anything about the world and just taking everything at face value because your side says that this is good. Jared Kushner is as dangerous as anybody in the entire world. Stephen Miller, a lot of these guys have power. Jared Kushner, in many ways, has ultimate power. And this woman says that he's doing a great job. Does she realize that the reason why Long Branch, New Jersey has the American flag only flying on one pole and the other 6 are Israeli flags? Does she know that? His family owns that apartment complex right on the Atlantic Ocean. And that's something that will be duplicated many times over if given the opportunity. We are going to talk about Peter Thiel on Monday. Jen and I will talk about that together, why he's relocating to Argentina. Because again, when you put in a puppet like Milei, this is where a lot of them are going to flee. And listen, I feel terrible for the Argentinians, but we don't want them fleeing to our country.
Right before he was put into that position just a year or so earlier, he created a hedge fund, and the number one investor were the Saudis, who invested $2 billion in Jared Kushner's fund, both as a reward for a job well done, for the service that the Trump administration in the first term gave to the Saudis, and also for making sure that the Saudis' interests are protected. It's basically a bribe directly to the Trump family.
So I want to do a little sidebar real quick. Kushner's hedge fund Affinity Partners saw a $2 billion investment from Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund shortly after Kushner left the White House. Kushner worked closely with Saudi Arabia during his time at the White House, but denies any conflict of interest. Yeah, because why would anybody admit that they have a conflict of interest when they're making billions of dollars in corruption? This is a prime example of why people do not trust this country to function as a society anymore. And why would you? The criminal enterprise is not only moving at such a speed that you can't catch it. It's like cheetah speed. No pun intended. And at the same time, where is the rule of law? Where is the accountability? That's the point. And maybe the whole purpose of having people like this who want to be on this show, these are the same people that are going to be walking the National Mall for 2 weeks leading up to the 4th of July in support of the President of the United States because they can't think for themselves. They're told what they're told and they believe it. And even when you're confronted with tactical, factual evidence, they won't look the other way. And this is Glenn Greenwald we're talking about. We're not talking about somebody who's saying just go and support the Democratic Party. This is somebody who's saying, wake the fuck up already. What are you looking at? But some people can't be helped. They cannot be saved. They don't know anything, and yet they're so sure they know everything.
The Trump family created a crypto company called World Liberty Financial, 49% of which is now owned by the United Arab Emirates. We've heard so much here about how important the UAE is, about how Saudi Arabia is, and they're funneling gigantic sums of money directly to the Trump family.
Okay, but look.
A United Arab Emirates royal purchased a 49% interest in World Liberty Financial, another random company, LLC, that pops up out of nowhere, a Trump family-owned venture for $500 million, days before Trump's second inauguration. So what does that tell you? Well, it tells you quite a bit. It's also been well documented for quite some time, as many of you have probably seen and now know, that the unholy alliance between the United States and Israel, if it includes a third party, it is the United Arab Emirates. Pretty much most savvy politicos know at this point that that is correct.
And they're funneling gigantic sums of money directly to the Trump family.
Okay, but look at, I just want to interject a little bit, because look at Nancy Pelosi, look at all the inside trading.
I agree with you completely.
It goes way beyond that.
No, that's
so
not
both
way beyond
sides
that.
do it. Is it right? No, but Biden administration and all of the people on the Democratic side are doing it so much worse on such a...
You see, you want to say that more people do it in the Biden orbit? Fine, I'll even give you that one. The idea that you have any clue as to what you're talking about, lady, Michelle, if that's your real name, probably isn't. If you see this, I know one of Don Jr.'s primary business partners. I've met him. And I can assure you that whatever you think you know about real financial corruption, you don't know anything. You know less than nothing. And at the same time, I am not here to provide any protection for the likes of Pelosi, for the likes of Wasserman Schultz, for Senator Mullen, any of these heavy hitters that do insider trading. I am not here to protect them, defend them, no matter what. But at the same time, do you really think any of these small potatoes really have any idea what it means to get to the very top of the mountain? The President of the United States is open for business, and he does it without a shred of humility. He doesn't care who knows. He doesn't care who sees it. And it is always to the top bidder. And when you are in control of the world's hegemony regarding its currency, current resources, and much more, you are now seeing the legitimate effects of what happens when there are no guardrails, where there is no protection. Libertarian utopia. What are you going to do? You want to know why you're going to be spending $10 on a gallon of gas in a very short time? This is why. And perhaps you're too stupid to see it or too naive. Whatever it is important to understand why this is a problem. And hopefully, if you hear it enough times, maybe you'll eventually understand.
Larger scale. It's affecting America.
I worked a lot on the Hunter Biden corruption case, principally that he got $50,000 a month from a company in Ukraine called Burisma when Vice President Biden had immense influence in Ukraine.
It was way more than that.
And as Andy McCarthy said.
All right, I want you to listen one more time because it has been well documented that Hunter Biden was probably receiving about $50,000-$60,000 a month from Burisma when he was working there.
Corruption case, principally that he got $50,000 a month from a company in Ukraine called Burisma when Vice President Biden had immense influence in Ukraine.
It was way more than that.
How do you know that? How do you, Michelle, know that it was way more than 50,000? How do you know that? How does anybody know anything? You know, I have often said that I know a lot about politics and I know very little in the grand scheme of things. Because I am still a civilian. I am still on the outside looking in. And I only know so much, and to take most with a grain of salt. I do not sit in those rooms. I do not know how these deals go down. I don't know how these shell companies move money to whom and to where. But yet somehow this lady knows. She knows better than anybody else. And when they're and she said it so emphatically, like she was so sure of herself when she said it. Much more than that. Much more. There's a great saying about the ignorance of humanity, the ignorance of man or woman. There are no sides anymore. That's over with. Like if you're still playing that game, you're an enemy of the United States. Not the same as somebody who's supporting the state of Israel, but let me assure you, if you're still playing that red-blue bullshit, you're an enemy of the United States.
McCarthy said, who's a longtime Republican conservative prosecutor, in order to talk about or compare the corruption, similar corruption by the Trump sons and by Jared Kushner, you have to add 2 zeros to the amounts. And I think that's what the concern is.
Biden was so corrupt.
We gotta move on. Thank you. You've been voted out.
Biden this, Biden that. How about Biden, yes, and Trump as well? And the last one I'm going to show you, and this is very important, guys. I want you to understand that it isn't just about Israel. It's also about, as I've been pointing out time and again, the last line of defense that Israel has over the United States and its people. Not all of them, obviously. That's changed dramatically. But for those that are still willing to look the other way, anti-Muslim bigotry is very real, and disregarding the Palestinian people, the Iranian people, that their humanity, their lives don't matter, that they should just be blown to smithereens. Here's one more MAGA supporter and how they view this problem.
It is completely different when their own people are supporting it. My main point is this.
How do you know? Let me ask that, because it's so fascinating to me when people say the Iranian people want to be bombed, they want to have their bridges blown up, they want to have.
I'm just saying.
How do you know what the Iranian people want? There are 96 million of them. Have you been there? Do you speak the language?
No, I've just seen the videos of in Tehran where there are.
And where do you think those videos are coming from? Do you really think that they are allowing to think of it this way, Mr. I am so hot and bothered about ever? Have you been? Here's what I can tell you, Mr. Wave. That's what I'm going to call him. Here's what I can tell you, Mr. Wave. When you have control over satellite data like Starlink does through Musk, through any of the channels that is getting out from Tehran, what do you think is getting out? Anything and everything that is pro-U.S. Israel Western propaganda. Nothing and I do mean nothing, that is in favor of Iranian liberation through their own means, not with us and not anything to do with us. And the only way that information ever gets out is second and third hand directly from people that are there, usually through their own family members, one of which I have a direct contact with. But you talk about this like you know what the fuck you're talking about, and you don't know anything. And that's why Glenn is clearly upset here, because he's basically telling him in his very eloquent, professional, decorum way, you are a dumbass who doesn't understand anything about politics, much less foreign policy, much less politics. And that is a huge part of this problem.
Are thousands of them cheering in the streets.
There are thousands of Israelis today in Tel Aviv protesting against the war with Iran.
90% of Israelis support the war, and they have taken no.
You're right.
They have taken on 3,700 casualties in the civilian population, and they support it.
This is my point, though, is that you cannot judge what an entire population wants by the fact that
I can see it in the streets. I don't have to judge it. I'm looking at them cheer in the streets.
You can see in the streets in the United States huge numbers of people marching against Donald Trump and calling him a monarch and a Hitler. But you wouldn't say that that means that that's representative of American public opinion. How do you, who never visited Iran, who doesn't speak the language, who I bet knows very little about Iranian history, how do you know what the majority of 96 million Iranians want when it comes to whether we want them, they want us bombing their country?
I know there are, we don't have data in the last few weeks, but I know there are journalists that have gone there. They have created public opinion polls asking who supports the IRGC and who does not. It always overwhelmingly comes out that they do not support
You're the one who told me that you weren't that bothered by the blowing up of that school because we should prioritize American lives over Iranian lives, weren't you?
We were talking about the timing of it.
Now you're like, we should go to war because the people
We're talking
want
about
this?
the timing of why Trump did this. And I think the reason why he's done this is because the Iranian people will make it easier. The same is true for Israel, by the way. Israel's taken way more casualties than the U.S. And the reason why this is America first is because Donald Trump is able to see that Israel and the Iranian people are willing to do the work so that we take on less casualties.
Did he really just say that? One more time.
Casualties than the U.S. And the reason why this is America first is because Donald Trump is able to see that Israel and the Iranian people are willing to do the work so that we take on less casualties. And that's
It has already been well documented that the Israelis do everything in their capacity not to end up in combat zones, and that's why secretly over 12,000 U.S. troops that we know of are currently over there fighting on Israel's behalf. That is a fact. And you want to pretend like Israel wants to do the dirty work? I know it's cliche, but, you know, the Jews just pay people off if they want something done. Forgive me for my stereotype. But the idea that you think that Israel wants to do the dirty work and they're going to prevent the U.S. from doing it for them? I mean, I want to know what the hell this guy's on and what that means. Debating Glenn is not a smart move.
Have you seen pro-government? Have you seen pro-government protests in Iran?
No, I have not.
You haven't? You should go check because they're gigantic.
No.
And yes, the reason for that is because every population unites behind their leaders when they're attacked by a foreign country.
I just want to make
one more point. It's a tribal instinct that happens. George Bush was a hated president.
Right.
He got elected. 9/11 happened. All Democrats, liberals, people on the left, for the most part, united behind George Bush. It's a tribal instinct that when you're attacked by a foreign power, you unite behind
I just
your
want
government.
to make one more.
This is also one of the key reasons why, despite what you may or may think about communism, and I do not support communism, this is one of the primary reasons why Castro was able to stay in power for as long as he did at the doorstep of the United States, because the people rallied around their leader that there was attempts on his life every other week by our country. If they had just let sleeping dogs lie, perhaps the Cuban people would have risen up against Castro on their own and they would have dismantled communism. It's possible. But we just can't leave them alone because we wrecked the financial lives of the rich and powerful who had Cuba, specifically Havana, as a little club paradise for the rich and powerful to gamble and get away and fuck over the rest of the world. And the Cuban people decided they didn't want that anymore. And a revolution happened. And ever since 1959, we have been doing the exact same thing. So when these numbnuts talk about what they think they know or they don't know about Iran and their revolution that happened 20 years later, it's sort of the same thing. We just cannot get out of our own way. And that, in many ways, is why these things happen. And kudos in a big way to Glenn Greenwald for doing a phenomenal job, as you can see. And as I only showed about 7 or 8 minutes of this exchange, he sat down with these guys for, I believe, about 2 hours. That was on film. We don't even know how much additional footage there probably was that was ended up on the cutting room floor. But this gives you a pretty good idea of when you are stuck in that mindset. Completely stuck. You can't shake it. And they don't want to shake it. Because the one thing I've seen, and this is true from any events that I've been to, whether by myself, with Jen, with other people, the get-togethers for the MAGA movement, especially over the past decade, it's very community-oriented. It's very flag-waving, very red, white, and blue, very pro-America. And it is a unifying way of life for many people. And I get that. And even if the premise behind it and why it's happening is false or wrong, you can't convince people that make up their entire identity based on an ideology that they're wrong. It's like trying to convince people that falling on the sword for religion is a complete waste of your life. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't believe in God and that you shouldn't be God-fearing. But the whole idea that you never question your church, your synagogue, your mosque, etc., that is detrimental to the health and safety of humanity. Killing in the name of faith is tale as old as time. And the same is true when your religion, in so many ways, is based on your politic. Because for them, it is a religion. And that's how this works. And so for Glenn to do this, and he did it well, but you could tell by the time he got to Mr. Wave at the end, he'd had enough.